Welcome everyone to today's Huessy seminar. If it's your first time here, we are happy you made it and hope you'll return for more. And to our regulars, welcome back and thank you for being a part of this conversation. We are especially pleased today to have Major General Stacy Huser, and she will be introduced more in more detail by Peter. My name is Alex Littlefield. I'm the fellow here at the National Institute for Deterrence Studies, or NIDS for short, and thank you for being here. We're a 501c3 think tank. Our motto is Think Deterrence, which basically means peace through strength. And we're laser focused on this theme of deterrence. And we promote this focus through our weekly podcast, the NIDS View and NIDS Knowledge, our journal Global Security Review, and our events, which include both in-person events in DC and elsewhere, and then, of course, our virtual events such as today's. And we also have a NIDS Academy. Now, without further ado, over to you, Peter.
Thank you very much, Alex. And I want to welcome Stacy Jo Huser, who is a Major General and Commander of 20th Air Force. And also, as part of Global Strike Command, it's at Francis E. Warren Air Force Base in beautiful state of Wyoming. General Huser is responsible for 12,000 airmen providing nuclear global strike and nuclear weapons sustainment for the United States Air Force. She was commissioned through Officer Training School in 1996 after earning a bachelor's degree from North Central College in Naperville, Illinois. She has extensive experience in space operations, instructor and training manager, as well as an ICBM combat crew commander, evaluator and chief of emergency warlord plans. She also completed staff tours in the Secretary of the Air Force's office in legislative liaison and at the United States Strategic Command at Offutt Air Force Base in Nebraska. She commanded the 620th Strategic Operations Squadron in Offutt and the 91 Missile Operations Group in beautiful Minot Air Force Base in North Dakota, and the 90th Missile Wing at Francis F. Warren Air Force Base, which is where she is now. Prior to this current assignment, Major General Huser served as the Principal Assistant Deputy Administrator for military applications at the National Nuclear Security Administration, the Department of Energy in Washington, where I first met her. And in that role, she assisted the Deputy Administrator for Defense Programs to maintain the safety, security, and reliability of the nation's nuclear weapons stockpile. And by the way, she has one of the most extraordinary presentations about what her responsibilities were that she gave at one of my NNSA seminars, which I hope you still have that, General, because it was an extraordinary, you outdid Madeline Creedon, who has put together a couple others like this. So on behalf of Jim Petrosky, who's my president, and the rest of the folks here at NIDS, I want to welcome you and thank you so much for coming to speak with us today. And over to you, General.
Well, sir, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I doubt I outdid Madeline Creedon because she's amazing. It's really awesome to have this time to speak to all of you. What my plan is for today is to give you just some generic background on the ICBM force. I want to tell you a little bit about the base where I actually live. And then I'm going to weave in just some of our thoughts on deterrence and then how our current modernization efforts weave into that. So it is going to be pretty generic, but I hope that when we have Q&A, which I'll leave plenty of time for Q&A, I hope during that time you ask me any specific questions that you want, and I'll do my best to answer those. So like Peter said, I've spoken to his various forums before, but that was mostly in my previous position with the Department of Energy. Super fun job. I got to see our nuclear enterprise from a different perspective, and I will talk a little bit about that later. So I was one of the generals that was held up for promotion with the Tuberville holds. So on 5 December, when that kind of let loose, I was promoted unbeknownst to me. And then a month later, so on January 5th, I took command of 20th Air Force. So I oversee, and we've actually recalculated our numbers. So we're now at about 13,500 people, and we are spread across 4 intercontinental ballistic missile wings. And one of those is actually not an ICBM wing, it's Kirtland Air Force Base. So if you're familiar with Kirtland, it's kind of a nuclear support base is what we call that. And then we also have one helicopter group that falls underneath us. So our 3 ICBM wings, if you're not familiar with those, we have one here where I am at F.E. Warren Air Force Base in Cheyenne, Wyoming. One at Malmstrom Air Force Base in Great Falls, Montana, one at Minot Air Force Base in Minot, North Dakota, which is actually shared with a bomber wing. So that is by far the most powerful wing in the military. And then again, we have Kirtland Air Force Base in Albuquerque, New Mexico. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about where I live at F.E. Warren, just because I find the history very interesting. And I hope you will too, and maybe it's something that you don't normally get to hear in these types of forums. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about where I live. So F.E. Warren Air Force Base is the oldest continuously active military installation within the Air Force. It was established in 1867, so about 157 years ago. This base has always played a critical role in the defense of our nation throughout its history. From the Railroad Act of 1862, the base was originally designated Fort D.A. Russell, and it served to protect the railroad workers. Then during World War I, the post served as a mobilization point and training facility for field artillery and cavalry groups. As World War I began, Fort Russell had become one of the largest military posts in the United States. Around 1927, the last cavalry units left the installation, which ended 60 years of cavalry history at Fort Russell. President Hoover issued a proclamation in 1930 which renamed the post Fort Francis E. Warren to honor Wyoming's territorial and first state governor. Warren, who received the Medal of Honor for heroism during the Civil War at the age of only 19, was a U.S. Senator for 37 years. In 1947, F.E. Warren played a short but key role in training our Air Force personnel before it transitioned to the mission we know today. Under Strategic Air Command, F.E. Warren became the first fully operational ICBM base in the Air Force, having responsibility for 24 Atlas missile sites. A short time later, F.E. Warren was designated the 90th Strategic Missile Wing and became home to the new Minuteman ICBM and eventually the addition of the new MX missile, the Peacekeeper, which hopefully you're aware we no longer have. That was a pretty sweet system. In 1991, when 20th Air Force stood back up and assumed responsibility for the ICBM mission, F.E. Warren Air Force Base was selected at the location for 20th headquarters, and that's where I reside now. So as Peter said, I had actually left this base. I was the wing commander here from 2017 to 2019. Absolutely loved it. But in 2019, the Air Force decided it was time for me to move on. I was really lucky to go work at U.S. Strategic Command for a year. I got to work directly for General Hyten and then served as the director of the Commander's Action Group when it transitioned from General Hyten to Admiral Richard. So I got to experience both of those leaders. And then after that year at US Stratcom was over, I moved to the Department of Energy, like Peter said. And I got to work with all the awesome people that design and produce our nuclear force. And like I said, I had always known all the military members, the DoD members that supported our nuclear enterprise. But that's when I got to learn about our amazing national laboratories, a lot of our industry partners that did the weapons side of our business. Then as you all are very familiar, the U.S. nuclear deterrent is the foundation of our national defense, and its credibility serves both to signal to adversaries the risks of threatening U.S. vital interests and to assure our allies of our U.S. capability, our resolve, and our military effectiveness. And I'll talk about that in depth in a few minutes. All of our nuclear deterrence work is in the hands of military members, federal employees, specialized technical talent at bases, at sea, underground, in the air, national laboratories, production facilities, security sites. And since the days of the Manhattan Project, the highly talented people of the nuclear security enterprise have responded to an ever-evolving global security environment. And this current environment presents risks that demonstrate now more than ever the need for a strong U.S. nuclear deterrent. And we've been tasked by the nation to modernize our nuclear delivery platforms like Sentinel, the B-21, the long-range standoff weapon, and the Columbia-class submarine, in coordination with modernizing our nuclear warheads. So across our country, hundreds of thousands of military, civilian, and federal personnel are working together in support of our nation and our allies. And none of this work is possible if places like Savannah, Georgia, Kansas City, Missouri, Los Alamos, New Mexico, Great Falls, Montana, Cheyenne, Wyoming, and many others aren't nestled in communities that are incredibly supportive of our missions and our people who are doing those missions. So we've been very appreciative, and I've learned to appreciate it more and more as I've gotten higher and higher in rank, the necessary support of our communities and how much they advocate for our missions to Congress, to our own leaders in the military. So I've been super appreciative. When I began my Air Force career, there was a clear competitor and focus for our forces. However, after years of operations revolving around the war on terror and the changing geopolitical environment, our focus has and must shift. We no longer live in a world where the greatest deterrent for use of nuclear weapons is mutually assured destruction. The principle of deterrence serves as a powerful mechanism to maintain stability and prevent conflict. Nuclear deterrence at its core hinges on the belief that possessing nuclear weapons serves as a deterrent against potential adversaries. And the rationale, as you all are very familiar, is straightforward. The threat of retaliation in response to aggression is meant to dissuade any rational actor from initiating nuclear conflict. And today's environment is vastly different than it was in the past. We find ourselves in a difficult situation where Russia has suspended its participation in the Strategic Arms Control Agreement, leading to much less transparency. And we know that several other nuclear weapon states are pursuing advancements in their arsenals and their capabilities. The main issue we have is that following the end of the Cold War, the focus on nuclear weapons had a period of atrophy. And now we find ourselves in a situation where we must invest in upgrades and replacements for our nuclear programs and supporting structures and infrastructure. The main role of 20th Air Force, where I reside, becomes to organize, train, and equip our airmen so that they're ready for tomorrow's conflict. And my job is to ensure the airmen that provide the backbone of our nuclear deterrent force receive the care and training it takes to continue to do their job at an extraordinary level of skill and expertise. And part of that is providing them with a new weapon system, which implements modern technology, incorporating years of feedback from both successes and failures. As we move forward with the incredible undertaking of fielding a replacement for the Minuteman III system, we need to ensure open communication to avoid unintentionally escalating geopolitical tensions while still assuring the global community that the current fleet is more than capable, and it really is more than capable. The efficacy of deterrence rests not only on the strength of capabilities, but also on the clarity of communication and mutual understanding. Clear communication of intentions and capabilities reduces miscalculations and misunderstandings that can inadvertently escalate tensions. This transparency fosters an environment where diplomacy and dialogue can prevail over confrontation and conflict. This is one of the reasons that follow-on test and evaluation, our test launches, are what you might be heard called our glory trips. They play such a critical role in not only providing information and data that will impact the development of Sentinel, but also serving to showcase our current capabilities to both our adversaries and allies, and to show that our forces stand ready 24/7, 365. The recent launches on June 4th and 6th are just two examples of how our nation's ICBMs and the professional airmen who maintain and operate them demonstrate their readiness and reliability of our weapon system. It highlights our commitment to deterrence as we prove our continuous alert. By broadcasting the successes of these launches and affirming our full force capability, We not only remind potential adversaries, but reassure our allies that we are capable and willing should the need arise. In today's environment, the landscape of nuclear deterrence is evolving. The proliferation of nuclear capabilities beyond traditional state actors introduces new complexities and uncertainties. Furthermore, technological advances in delivery systems, cyber warfare, and space-based capabilities are reshaping the calculus of deterrence. The interplay of offensive and defensive capabilities in the realm of nuclear strategy demands continual adaptation and innovation to maintain credible deterrence while reducing the risks of accidental or unauthorized use. Yet deterrence is not without its challenges. In an interconnected world marked by diverse geopolitical interests and asymmetrical threats, maintaining credible deterrence requires agility and adaptability. Amid these challenges, nuclear deterrence remains a critical tool for preserving peace and stability. However, it's not just the weapon system and its replacement that we're focused on to provide that peace and stability. We're also focused on our airmen and the various support elements needed for the development of our personnel. Prioritizing the well-being and readiness of our airmen is a top priority. This involves ensuring comprehensive training, maintaining high standards of security and safety, and providing support for both the physical and mental health of personnel and their families. Our airmen play a critical role in maintaining these weapons and ensuring operational effectiveness, so their care and readiness are paramount to mission success. Recently, we had an awesome success when it comes to caring for our airmen. We implemented something that's called the cold weather incentive pay, and that helps our airmen who are located in austere conditions like Minot, North Dakota and Great Falls, Montana. It helps them actually afford to live there with their families and purchase the items that they need for cold weather, like coats and snow tires. Different items like that, so that way they can continue to serve without having that burden of worrying about how they're going to pay to live in those climates. It's very important to recognize our airmen and the struggles that they face on a daily basis and to help provide relief when we can. But it's not only the airmen of today that we must recognize. Simultaneously, we recognize those that came before us and provided a foundation of integrity and honor that we hold ourselves to today. In early April, we had a great few days of celebrations because that's when we celebrated the 80th anniversary of 20th Air Force. We had a really memorable night. We had 5 airmen from our 4 wings and our 1 helicopter group get up and tell their Air Force story, what brought them to our Air Force. So it was very meaningful. And then we also renamed our 20th Air Force headquarters building to Irwin Hall in honor of Sergeant Henry Red Irwin, who was our only 20th Air Force Medal of Honor recipient from World War II. And sir, if you'll indulge me, I'm going to tell you all the story of Sergeant Irwin because I think it's very meaningful. So Irwin was born in 1921 in Adamsville, Alabama. He grew up in poverty and he lost his father at an early age. He was called to active duty in World War II as an aviation cadet in the Army Air Forces. And he trained as a pilot, but he washed out due to flying deficiency. So he was retrained as a radio operator and a radio mechanic. After training, Irwin was assigned to the 52nd Bombardment Squadron within the 29th Bombardment Group within what was then 20th Air Force. Irwin and his unit left for the Asia Pacific Theater in early 1945, and from February until April of 1945, they participated in a series of unescorted bombing strikes against cities in the heart of Japan, and Irwin served as a radio operator gunner. On April 12th of 1945, Irwin, who was called Red by his crewmates, was serving as the radio operator aboard a Boeing B-29 Superfortress, which was named the City of Los Angeles. The plane was in formation for a low-level attack on a chemical plant 120 miles north of Tokyo on what was only their 11th combat mission. Along with their primary jobs, the 12 B-29 crew members had additional duties they had to perform, and Irwin's was to drop phosphorus smoke bombs through a chute in the aircraft's floor when the lead plane reached a designated assembly area. He was given the signal to drop the bombs when the aircraft was just off the south coast of Japan and under attack by anti-aircraft fire and Japanese fighters. Irwin pulled the pin and released a bomb into the chute, but the fuse malfunctioned and ignited the phosphorus prematurely, burning at 1,500 degrees Fahrenheit. The canister flew back up the chute and into Irwin's face, blinding him, searing off one ear and obliterating his nose. Phosphorus pentoxide smoke immediately filled the aircraft, making it impossible for the pilot to see his instrument panel. Irwin was afraid the bomb would burn through the metal floor and make contact with the bomb bay. So completely blind, he picked it back up and feeling his way through the aircraft, he crawled around the gun turret and headed for the co-pilot's window. His face and arms were covered with ignited phosphorus and his path was blocked by the navigator's folding table. Irwin could not release the table's latches with one hand, so he grabbed the white-hot bomb between his bare right arm and his rib cage. In the few seconds needed to raise the table, the phosphorus burned through his flesh to the bone. His body on fire, he stumbled into the cockpit, threw the bomb out the window, and collapsed between the pilot's seats. The smoke cleared enough for the pilot to pull the B-29 out of a dive at 300 feet above the water and turn toward Iwo Jima, where Irwin could be given emergency treatment. His crew members extinguished his burning clothes and administered first aid, but whenever his burns were uncovered, the phosphorus embedded in his skin would begin to smolder. Although in excruciating pain, he remained conscious throughout the flight and spoke only to inquire about the safety of the crew. Once on Iwo Jima, the medical personnel who examined Irwin expected him to die. Army Air Force officials, led by Major General Curtis LeMay, approved Irwin's award of the Medal of Honor in a matter of hours so that a presentation could be made while he still lived. A medal was expeditiously flown from Hawaii to Guam and presented to him in the hospital. Amazingly, though, Irwin survived his burns. He was flown back to the United States, and after 30 months and 41 surgeries, his eyesight was restored and he regained use of one arm. He received a disability discharge as a master sergeant, and he went on to serve as a benefits counselor at the Veterans Hospital in Birmingham, Alabama for 37 years. And we were so lucky when we renamed our building after Red Irwin that his son came to attend the ceremony, and his son was probably as amazing as his father and told us just incredible stories of his dad. And there are books out there detailing the life of Red Irwin. If you all are interested and want to know more, I encourage you to check those out. So let me give you a few more business updates before I close and turn it over to you for questions. So we recently accepted custody of the MH-139 Alpha Gray Wolf helicopters at Malmstrom Air Force Base. We have 2 of them right there now. And we formed a provisional helicopter squadron, the 550th Provisional Helicopter Squadron. And they are the ones who are charged with producing mission-ready airmen to fly those new helicopters. Their motto is Latin, and I'm not going to pronounce it, but I'm going to tell you what it means. It means, by teaching, we learn. Emphasizing the great task that these highly qualified individuals have taken upon themselves, that they need to not only understand this airframe, but they also need to serve as the instructors for this new airframe. And we plan on them teaching over 300 air crew members how to employ it safely and effectively. As you all know, it's not an easy task to bring a new weapon system online, and it's even harder because we can't pause our mission to bring a new weapon system online. And that applies with helicopters, and it also applies with ICBMs. We're just getting started with all of our substantial modernization efforts. We recently broke ground on some key support buildings that are going to be instrumental to the Sentinel system. However, many of the specific designs are still in development and testing phases. One recent fantastic step forward was on June 18th. We had the first successful test of Lockheed Martin's new Mark 21A reentry vehicle, which is the reentry vehicle we need to support fielding the W-87-1 warhead for the Sentinel ICBM. See a couple other things. I'm going to skip ahead here. See what else I can tell you guys. You know all about great power competition. So actually, I will conclude there. I think those are the big updates I wanted to give you. What I like to say for our ICBM force, and we just made new coins for 20th Air Force, is that we serve as the bedrock of nuclear deterrence. After the START treaty, we are limited to 400 launch facilities. And at any given time, some of those may or may not have an ICBM loaded in it because we have different just maintenance that we need to do. We pull them out for testing, like the glory trips. But at any given time, we typically have over 380 ICBMs that are on alert 24/7, ready to go within minutes should we need to use them. And sir, with that, I will turn it over and see what else you want to talk about.
Stacy, that was wonderful, and that is quite a story. Every time I hear it, it's I have I have nothing to complain about about any job I have. I'm going to ask you some questions about both critics and supporters of ICBMs. I'm going to start with supporters, and I would like you to, from your perspective, lay out what do they mean when they say things such as ICBMs seriously stress an adversary's attack plans. Number two, they are highly responsive. Third, being on alert nearly 98, 99% of the time, they're thus highly cost effective. So those three areas, didn't want to go more than that, but one is that they stress an adversary's attack plans, whatever they might be. They're very responsive, which some people think that, well, do you really want them to be? And I understand that. The other thing is, given their high alerts rates, they really are highly cost effective. So could you address those three functions of what supporters of ICBMs talk about?
Yes, sir. So for your first one, what we say are ICBMs present a overwhelmingly challenging calculus for our adversaries. If we didn't have 400 launch facilities and 45 launch control centers spread out across the northern tier of the United States, our adversaries would have just a handful of nuclear targets that they could attempt to take out in order to defeat our nuclear capabilities. You would have, a couple of B-52 bomb wings. You'd have a B-2 bomb wing, maybe US Stratcom, maybe the 2 submarine bases. And that's just a few targets. So what we do is we provide an additional at least about 445 targets that if they don't also eliminate those as a potential, then it's a bad day for them. And so, and additionally, our launch facilities are hardened targets. Our launch control centers are pretty far underground. So we figure an adversary, and this is what we would do if we were in this situation, an adversary is going to probably need more than one weapon if they're going to target those sites. So if they were to try to take those out, that would take up the majority, if not all, of their arsenal. And so your next point, that the ICBMs are highly responsive. Like I said, our ICBMs are on alert at all times. Whenever we experience a fault, whether that's a mechanical fault, a security fault, a targeting fault with our ICBMs, we fix them immediately. We are doing maintenance constantly. Sometimes we joke and say maintenance is our mission because we are constantly maintaining these weapons to ensure their very high alert rate. They are responsive. One thing that always upsets me, though, is when people use language like they're on hair trigger alert, or when people think that there's just a red button that some crew member can push and they're going to launch ICBMs. There are an incredible number of safeguards and procedures and actions that crew members need to go through before deciding to launch an ICBM, and then even the act of launching an ICBM. There are a lot of safeguards that need to happen, and one person or one crew is not capable of doing that on their own. There needs to be several people that need to agree that they received a valid and authentic direction from the president in order to take those actions. So they're not on hair trigger alert. You can't accidentally launch one. You can't launch one if you're having a bad day. Other actions that we take involve making sure that the crew members and anybody who has access to a nuclear weapon, we make sure that they are of the highest reliability. And we screen these individuals very thoroughly to make sure that, they're not in any type of financial trouble, that they are mentally fit, that they have a good attitude towards their job, that they're not under any type of stress. And if a person is under any type of stress or hardship or illness or anything like that, then we prevent them from having access to a launch control center, access to a launch facility, access to a weapon in any way. We temporarily remove their access, and when they are back to 100%, we let them have their access back and perform their duties. And then, sir, you said, cost effective. Yes, we talk about how much it costs in terms of man hours and pieces and parts to maintain these weapons, but keeping them at the incredibly high alert rate that we do, it really is a drop in the bucket. But it is this is an aging weapon system. The Minuteman III that we currently have fielded is an aging weapon system. The amount of hours we've had to invest in it has increased quite a bit over the last 5 years because it is aging, and it is on the backs of our airmen and our amazing civilians that we keep this incredibly high alert rate. All right, I think I hit all three of your points. Let me know if I missed anything.
No, you did, Stacy, and you've now covered one of the arguments of critics, and I've listed three. A sponge, and therefore it doesn't serve any purpose. They just soak up Russian or Chinese warheads or whatever. You dealt a little bit with the idea, is it on hair trigger? And you saw one of my essays in which I figured Minuteman 1, 2, and 3 have been on alert somewhere around 3.5 million minutes since they first were deployed. And I would say that is some remarkable launch control, as opposed to if someone around your house was on hair trigger for 3.5 million minutes, I think we hear about it. So the other question is asked that people say, well, it's destabilizing because it's a first strike weapon. So just, is it a sponge? You've dealt with hair trigger to a degree. Is it destabilizing because you only can go first? Because if you ride out an attack, you might not have any left.
And I probably won't talk too much about those, sir, because they tend to get towards policy issues, and
Okay.
I'm afraid somebody will slap me for saying anything.
Okay, I don't want to put you in that position.
Yes, sir. So I of course am a huge fan of my weapon system. Even if we were to take a large amount of incoming and lose quite a bit, and even perhaps lose our ability to command and control, we are incredibly fortunate, and not a lot of people, I don't know if all of the folks who have joined us today know that we have an aircraft that also has the ability to launch these weapons if needed. The ability to launch these weapons from the air, should we give them permission to do so, and if we get to that point in a conflict. So we are incredibly fortunate that we have backup capabilities in the event that for some reason the crew members on the ground are unable to do what they need to do.
Okay, understood. I'm going to go to what the Admiral Richard, General Cotton, and others have said. two peer adversaries, both nuclear armed, and by 2030, in that neighborhood between 2030 and 40, as Professor Chris Yacht told us in Shreveport last week, we could be facing 10,000 nuclear warheads in the arsenals of China and Russia. What makes that such a challenge, given we faced similar numbers at the height of the Cold War? I think the USSR had 13,000 strategic warheads that were SALT countable. You could do that just in 1991 when START 1 was signed and went to the Senate for ratification. So what makes this two-peer adversaries so unique, such a challenge?
Sir, I would say from my perspective, some of it is just the sheer quantity. And so you enter into debates on, what do we need to do as a country? Is it matching our adversaries in terms of numbers? Is it instead matching our adversaries in terms of capabilities? Is it the way we do targeting? Do we need to change policies when it comes to that? And and again, I don't know what the answer is. I do know from where I sit, it's hard because our crew members of the past were trained on how to react to a single adversary, and that's the way our guidance was written. That's the way our checklist was written. That's the way we exercised and trained, and now we've got to find new ways to do that. We've got to react to changing policy, changing guidance, changing checklists, changing procedures. Everything is changing, and our crew members are learning how to adapt to that. And what does the world look like now with having two different adversaries who are modernizing at such a high rate and increasing the quantity of weapons, especially with China at such a high rate?
The next question is one I also put in the chat. It's from Chris Gordon, who is with the Air Forces Association, Air and Space Forces magazine. And he says, if there's a delay in getting Sentinel, the new ICBM, what steps can you take or are you taking to handle the transition from Minuteman to make sure that it not only is viable through 2030, but perhaps instead of the middle of the decade, I don't want to put, but let's say you're going to need it for a couple more years or however long we figure this out. But what steps can you take to not only keep it through 2030, but if you have to go beyond current plans?
Oh, that's great, and that's something that we're thinking about on a daily basis. We have a lot of amazing partners at the Air Force Nuclear Weapons Center, Global Strike Command, who are looking at the Minuteman III and its components, and we're looking at, a lot of Minuteman III is aging very gracefully, but we're trying to forecast what are those components that, depending on the Sentinel timeline, what are those components that we're going to need to look into replacing, designing new, designing better, refurbishing. What does our periodic maintenance cycle look like? How does that change? What new security features may we need, may we not need? So we're looking at all of that now. So depending on what the answer is for Sentinel, and what year initial capability of Sentinel is and full capability of Sentinel is, we're figuring out what do we need to do for Minuteman III to ensure that it remains the incredibly capable and effective system that it is today.
Thank you. I'm going to turn it over to my president, Jim Petrosky, for any questions he might ask you. Jim, if you're there, if you would, whatever you'd like to ask the general.
Well, General Huser, again, I thank you for being a part of this. I think this is quite valuable to the folks that are here. Yeah, again, on the schedule for modernizing, I'm curious as to what concerns you have with the shortfall, the advertised shortfall in manpower we have for development, especially in the skill labors, not necessarily the science and technology labors, and what's being done in that area. We keep hearing that at almost every conference about that workforce management. Can you address that, please?
So I'll address it because I'll put on my old hat from the NNSA. Because yes, like I said, all of our enterprise atrophied for probably over a decade.
Yeah.
I would use words like neglected for over a decade, and so we lost a lot of knowledge and talent. A lot of equipment just sat in place and like literally rusted. A lot of the dude who knew the formula for the thing, that wasn't ever written down, like he's gone now. So you're right. It's retaining the force that we have and then growing that force. But the struggle with that, and all the labs and production sites are doing exactly that. They are growing their personnel by thousands a year. But what that does is now they have an incredibly young set of professionals who are figuring this all out. And the old graybeards who knew it all aren't necessarily around to teach them. So a lot of them are figuring it out. They're figuring it out with the few knowledgeable folks who are still there who can help guide and teach. But it means we have an incredibly young force out in our labs and our production sites, which brings its own challenges. And then the other challenge is what do they need to do to retain that force? People are don't necessarily move to an organization and then stay there for 30 or 40 years. They kind of bounce back and forth. So for some of these sites, they know they're going to lose them. They just hope they get them back in a few years after they go do something else. And that's the best they can hope for. So it's what can we do to retain that force? The military, we're of course competing for the same pool of people. So we also need to look at, what can we do differently to attract and retain people? How do we need to modernize ourselves? And what things can we do to incentivize that force to join us and then to stay with us?
Thank you. Yeah, I know that's a real challenge because it's a feed and pull mechanism, and I appreciate your NNSA response because I saw that as well. That we're all fighting for the same people to do the same job from a different angle. So thank you. Yeah, I don't have any other further questions. I didn't know where we were on time. Oh, we still have some more time. So any more questions in the queue? I'll turn it back to Alex if he's got more questions in the queue, or we can close this out.
We do have some more questions in the queue. One's from Chris, and it regards AI. So he asks here, how would you consider and implement algorithmic AI decision-making support when dealing with human decision under stress? And then how are adversaries dealing with that?
Oh, whoa. Yeah, we don't normally think about AI and nukes in the same conversation. I know that we are, boy, probably like a lot of the military, and I don't know this to be a fact, but we are slowly introducing AI into like those safer areas. I think people are dipping their toes into it. Safe areas like how can we use AI to do, predictive maintenance on all the thousands of pieces and parts. How can we use AI to do that so that we're not so reactive when it comes to maintaining these critical weapon systems? How can we use AI to do simple things like scheduling crew members for alert, which you're probably not aware, but if you ask Missileers what their biggest gripe is, it's always going to be the schedule, probably like anybody else. It's always the alert schedule. So how can we use AI to do a better job of taking into account the needs of the mission, the needs of the system, and the needs of the human beings, and what they have going on in their lives to make a schedule that works for everybody? So I would say we're dipping our toes. I don't know a lot about I would say the Nuke Weapons Center side of the business. I don't know how they're using AI in the acquisition process, but I think that would be interesting to talk to them about that.
Okay.
General, I wanted to bring up an issue that was raised at great length at our conference last week, and that is NC3, a fancy name for Nuclear Command, Control, and Communication. Because as one of the generals said from Global Strike, he said, if we can't talk to our folks, we don't have a deterrent. And so you have to integrate what changes are being made in NC3 within two systems. One, the Minuteman system, if you're going to upgrade that, and then with Sentinel. What are some of the things you find that you can share with us about how that is going in the three missile squadrons?
Well, that's great. And we talk about the aging weapon system, and one of the things that we often forget to talk about is the aging infrastructure that connects that weapon system. If you were to be able to see the spider web of communication lines at any one missile wing, it is overwhelming the number of lines that connect launch facilities to launch facilities, launch facilities to the launch control centers where the missileers are, and then launch control centers to launch control centers. And each of those lines is incredibly valuable for, as you said, making sure that we're getting messages, we're getting communication, we're getting direction from the president, we're getting information from the missiles back to the crew members, the missiles constantly telling the crew members, I'm doing great, I'm doing great, oh, I have a fault, or hey, that thing you told me to do, I just did it and I did it right and we got good results. So all of that communication needs to happen internally at a wing, and then it also needs to happen externally as we're receiving what we call like force direction messages, emergency action messages from higher levels of leadership telling us to take different actions. So incredibly important. The NC3, the Nuclear Command and Control, has been one of those very, I don't know if nebulous is the right word, but it's very messy. It's been tried over the years to figure out, well, who owns it, who should own it, who should be doing the things to maintain it, because there are hundreds of different systems that make up the NC3, and trying to wrap your arms around that is incredibly challenging. And then to know that you need to make sure a new weapon system is able to integrate into that is also very challenging for all of those same reasons.
I'm wondering if when you describe the big mess you have there with NC3, if somehow AI could come in and maybe make sense and heads and tails of how this could be simplified and how to like maybe put someone in charge of making sure things run smoothly.
Yes, and I truly hope they're thinking of that. And if they aren't, then I will definitely recommend that, because I think that would be a great use of AI.
Any more questions on your end, Peter? You're muted.
We may have one more from Chris Gordon from the Air Force magazine, but I'm going to have to find it here. Stacy, where does your NNSA work complement what you do in terms of you're going to put a new warhead on 400 missiles, and you have the bulkhead and you have the weapon itself, as well as and explain to us some of the things you have to go through to do that. Because again, you're going to have to simultaneously, to the extent at which you add them to Minuteman, I don't know if you are, but I assume you're going to add them to the force as they are produced.
So actually the W87-1 is just for Sentinel.
Sentinel.
It's not going to go on Minuteman. It does, I mean, it helps. My previous job helps in some really squishy, touchy-feely ways. So now when someone explains the complexities of putting a new weapon on a missile, when they talk about the challenges of testing, when they talk about, delays or, hey, we haven't, the plutonium pits, like all of those things. I can understand now both sides. One of the things I've realized is, in the Air Force, we're not making things in the Air Force. We're relying on industry, we're relying on labs to make the things. Well, now I've been part of an organization that actually made the things. So I understand a lot of the challenges associated with that, the infrastructure, the work that needs to be done 10 years in advance. Like sometimes you have to build a building and you needed to have started that 10 years ago if you want to make the thing today. So I feel like I can now speak the same language. One of the things that is a particular challenge that your audience might find interesting is literally the testing schedule. So we have limited number of resources to be able to test Minuteman 3, to test Sentinel, and then we also need to test a new reentry vehicle, a new warhead, new fuses. So all of that a lot of times is relying on the same humans and the same testing capabilities. And so that schedule is getting very populated right now, and it's hard to squeeze more things into it. So there's a lot of compromises that need to occur and a lot of creative thinking. So they're finding ways to test multiple things at the same time. Uh, and they're doing it a lot more than we had in the past when we had the luxury of, ample space between different tests. So just the very just jam-packed testing schedule is one of our challenges when it comes to bringing on these different systems and all their pieces and parts.
Thank you. We do have another question from Chris Gordon of the AFA magazine. He says that the Global Strike Command has been very upfront with the results of the progress with the missile community cancer study. What's your feedback? He asks. What are you getting from the airmen and the missileers?
So I have been, and I'm not saying this because he's my boss. I have been incredibly impressed and grateful that General Bussier has wrapped his arms around the cancer study and has pushed to be as transparent as humanly possible. And he's been really great. I of course am, because I'm a missileer, I'm friends with a lot of the missileers who have different forms of cancers and who are personally concerned about the results of the cancer study. So General Bussier has been incredibly gracious and given me a lot of freedom to tell him what I'm hearing from the missileers. And him and his team have been great at doing, they were doing a lot of town halls, and they have recently opened up those sessions basically to the public, which the Air Force has been reticent to do a lot of times because you just never know who's going to be on there and just how people are going to react or if they're going to say something ugly or hurtful. And he has taken that risk and opened up those forums to the public so he can reach as many former missileers, because a lot of them, they're not going to have access to Microsoft Teams if they're retired or separated. So he has opened it up so he can reach as many former missileers as possible in order to give them the updates on what Global Strike Command and USAF SAMs, our medical experts, are doing, all the testing that's going on, all the review of historical data, all the review of medical information, so that way we can provide people the latest information and just tell them what we're doing to help them out as they pursue care, veterans benefits, answers, all of those things. So I have just been incredibly grateful that General Bussier has been doing what he's been doing. It's been awesome.
Thank you very much, General. I have one final question. from time to time, you have to test the Minuteman missile. And my understanding, if I'm correct, is that you don't just call up Vandenberg and say, we're going to be there tomorrow. You have to get on a schedule, and you got to schedule this thing long in advance. However, whenever there is a test, we are accused of, we're bullying or intimidating somebody, or we're sending a signal. There is a signal we're sending, but I want you to talk about it.
I love that. So yes, so we publish a 5-year forecast of tests. And it includes when we intend to do those test launches from Vandenberg. It also includes other tests that we do that are even more comprehensive, but we do them at a missile wing. So we do a thing called SELM, Simulated Electronic Launch Minuteman, and we do that at the missile wing itself. And it's where we send all of the signals, but we we disconnect a few things so the missile doesn't actually launch, of course, and there's no warhead on top of it. But we run all the signals to make sure that, if we were told to do so, that the system would work as designed. So and there's a bunch of other tests that we do. All of that testing is forecasted 5 years in advance. So personally, as a missileer, I do find it frustrating when we're getting ready to do a test and someone gets excited and says, oh, you're doing it in response to, somebody in a nation that maybe is not our favorite, did something, and you're doing it in response to that. That is never the case. This has been forecasted for years. But you're right, when we do a test, it is very good strategic messaging. It shows our allies, like, hey, here's our system. It's Minuteman 3. It might be old, but look at it go. It is amazing. And like the ones we did earlier this month, 2 of them within days of each other, like that's incredible. And then obviously shows our adversaries that we still have this wonderful capability, and they launch and they go to where we launched them to. So check that out. So yes, sir, you are spot on.
Thank you. That was, I was waiting for that answer. It was wonderfully done. As General Lord once said, he said, Peter, I have ICBMs in my DNA, and I do too. And this is, it's been an extraordinary 44 years since we started trying to find a place in the Reagan administration for Peacekeeper, at the time as known as MX. But it has been quite a journey along with that and Minuteman and the entire nuclear deterrent. I don't have any more questions. You've done wonderfully. We are now at 56, 57 minutes into the presentation. Thank you, General Huesser. I really appreciate you coming on and talking, and I hope to see you in September.
Yes, sir, you will. Yeah.
Okay, at the at my dear friends in Minot, North Dakota, they have to be some of the happiest people in the world, because you'll call them up and say, how are things? And he said, well, we had 22 inches of snow and it's 25 degrees below zero. And oh, by the way, I'm out, I'm going grocery shopping or something. I said, there's no weather in the world that you can complain about if you don't live in Minot, North Dakota. It's extraordinary what they have dealt with. So Alex, thank you for all your great help. We will have an in-person breakfast with Uzi Rubin from Israel, who's going to talk about not just the Iranian, but the entire Middle East complex with respect to missiles and missile defense, because he was the godfather of Arrow and the ballistic missile office in Israel. And then we will hear from your old boss, Jill Hubry, who will also be a breakfast guest at the Capitol Hill Club, which is where we started this series, and hopefully we'll expand it again post-COVID. So we'll have that, and then we have a number of others. But Stacy, thank you on behalf of NIDS and our president who's here, and Alex and myself. You did a wonderful job as usual. I look forward to seeing you in September. And again, thank you. And we will send you the link as soon as it's available and ready. But again, thank also your staff for all the help they gave us. Would you please?
Yes, sir. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, Stacy. Take care. Bye.